Today we're joined by Georgia Bayliss-Brown, who works for the Marine Climate Change Impacts Partnership, whose Secretariat is based at CEFAS. Today Georgia will be basically talking about the MCCIP's recent activities, in particular the findings of their 2013 report card. Before I hand over to Georgia, just a note, if any of you have any questions, we'll leave these to the end of the webinar. You have two options if you want to ask a question. The first is you may raise a virtual hand, which you can do by clicking on the left-hand vertical toolbar. You'll find a button with a little hand on it. If you click at that at any time during the webinar, that will then let us know that you have a question, and we can then unmute your microphone at the end and you can ask your question directly. Alternatively, if you're feeling shy, you can type your question in using the Questions tab you'll also find on your menu. Right, so without any further ado, I shall hand over to Georgia. Georgia.
Thank you. Yes, so as said, my name is Georgia Bayliss-Brown and I work at CEFAS, the Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Aquaculture Science, which, for those of you that don't know, it's an executive agency of DEFRA. I'm a climate change scientist here at CEFAS, but myself and my colleague Paul Buckley head the MCCIP, the Marine Climate Change Impacts Partnership Secretariat here. And I'm also responsible for science communication at CEFAS. So the reason that we're presenting MCCIP via webinars at the moment is to try, we've had a very active year this year, and we're trying to disperse this information as much as possible. So within this presentation, I'm going to cover the 2013 report card, the research priorities that have come out of that, the special topic report card that we are working on this year and should be launched in this financial year, so probably January, February of next year, and the work that we've been doing with industry that we're planning to expand over time. So I'm anticipating for me to be talking for approximately half an hour, and then, as said earlier, we'll go on to questions. So, for some reason my slides aren't going down. Why is that?
Georgia, if you click on the webinar,
yeah.
There we are. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to use the arrow rather than my down keys, that's fine. Okay, so MCCIP was set up in 2005 as a result or finding of the State of our Seas report, and they were really looking to find, well, to have a location where findings of the status of the science, marine climate change impacts, is coordinated and communicated to policy advisors and decision makers. So we've produced 6 report cards so far. 4 of these are called annual report cards. They quite often happen, the whole process can often take a little bit more than a year. And we also have had 2 special topic report cards where, rather than having a large coverage of all of the topics, as the annual report cards do, we focus on a particular topic area. So we've done one on ecosystem linkages and another on fish, fisheries and aquaculture. So what's particularly nice about the MCCIP report card is that it's been picked up internationally. So in Australia they've picked it up and they're using almost exactly the same branding for their own report cards. And LWEC have been using a similar technique to present their terrestrial and terrestrial biodiversity and water cards that they've launched this year. And we've had inquiries from South Africa and people working on Arctic surveys to help them in producing report cards in the future. So here are our partners. You can see that it's quite a diverse combination of devolved administrations, NGOs, and environmental and scientific organisations. We have a steering group made up of approximately 25 organisations with regular attendance from about 20 people. We have a management group formed of DEFRA, the Marine Biological Association, CEFAS, Scottish Natural Heritage and Marine Scotland. So we've got a nice representation of Scotland there. I should say that we're currently approaching the second phase of MCCIP. So we've got 2 5-year business plans that have sat back to back, and our current business plan ends in March of next year. So we're developing a new business plan at the moment for the 3rd phase. So any developments, partners or ideas are certainly welcomed, and we'd like to write those into a proposal if anyone has any ideas for that. So to look at the report card for 2013 we launched in December of last year. So actually we possibly should have called it 2013-14 to ensure that people realised its relevance for this year. It's the largest of the 6 report cards that we've launched so far, and the backing papers reach approximately 350 pages of evidence. So we've had 150 authors contribute from 50 organisations, and they're all of the backing papers that they produced were peer-reviewed by 30 reviewers. So the way the report card works is that currently we have 33 topics. It's grown slightly over time. So the Arctic sea ice, sorry, I'm just going to move this out of the way. So the Arctic sea ice topic is new. We now have shipping, which includes ports, and the built structures that we were dealing with have been split off into onshore and offshore topics. What we ask the authors to do, we have a lead author, and then we make suggestions of who might want to co-author with them, but ultimately it's for them to make the decision of who they feel is best suited to filling the bill in producing the report. The reports tend to be about 20 pages long, and they include an executive summary, a summary of what is already known in that field of interest and what's likely to happen in the future. Quite often people base these directly on the climate change scenarios. We also look at confidence in the report and the results, look at knowledge gaps of areas where they feel like more research could be performed, and socio-economic impacts, and of course references. So from these backing papers we come up with a 12-page summary report card. This is also put online, and we have an e-publication. The 33 topics that we have are divided pretty much so that policymakers are familiar with the groupings of the report cards. They are divided into the 4 UCMAS evidence groups. These cover ocean processes, healthy and biologically diverse seas, clean and safe seas, and commercially productive seas. One thing that's particularly new this year is that all of the backing papers have been DOI'd. For those of you who publish papers, you may notice that a lot of references now include a DOI number, and this is a digital object identifier. So it means that all of the papers are permanently citable, and they're all written in a journal-like format. So the report card structure, it's obviously evolved over time, but the brand is clearly recognisable, and we tend to have a few front-page headlines, so things that quite often get picked up in the papers tend to be focused on these key messages. As I said earlier, we have the 4 grouped themes, the confidence ratings, which is a very simple technique of looking at whether we have low, medium, or high confidence, and this is based on the amount of evidence that's present, and the amount of evidence is put against the level of agreement and consensus in the scientific arena. And we also have a regional map. These are topic-specific, again, on the 33 topics where they're relevant, and we've just made these available on the MCCIP website. And again, this is to assist the decision makers that are working on a more local level to see what areas of their science is relevant to them. So things that have changed since previous report cards. The number of reported headlines has reduced, and this is because we felt that where there was little change reported, it was best to focus on where there was greatest change in the other topics. And a lot of the reason that there was little change was that obviously climate change is constantly evolving, but there is a great difference in short-term variability and long-term climate change. So some topics will evolve much quicker than others. So for example, fish are more likely to change as a response to climate change on a seasonal level, and so therefore we see more regular changes in them, whereas Arctic sea ice perhaps, or I'm just trying to think of another one, and maybe marine mammals, it's less likely that you're going to see a response particularly quickly. So this is something that we really wanted to focus on in this report card and spent a lot of time explaining it in the first few pages. As I said earlier, we've got a more comprehensive regional map section, and we're planning to make a bigger thing of this over time. And we've also got the e-publication, and we've had 65 downloads of that so far, and we've distributed 3,000 hard copies of the card. As I said earlier, we're looking for more opportunities to transfer this knowledge, hence doing these webinars, and any further opportunities that anyone could suggest would be greatly appreciated. So if I look at the headlines that we came out with this year, we had 4 main headlines. The first 2 are things that were highly topical last year. So one of them was really to deal with the, in response to the hiatus of temperature change that was mentioned with the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change report launched last year. And what we can see is that a lot of people were saying about how climate change and temperature increasing have stopped. And what we were trying to say in this card is that there is still an overall upward trend, despite the fact that recent temperatures have been lower than the 2003 to 2007 increase. The other topic that was in the papers a lot last year was the fact that Arctic sea ice extent had reduced over time. However, last year a lot of people were saying that it had halted in reducing, and despite that it was still one of 7 years of the lowest ever recorded sea ice extents since the satellite era, so since we've actually really been able to see what's happening. One possible positive of that is that there have been more transit routes occurring for commercial ships. So the other 2 messages that we came out with, which were somewhat new to MCCIP cards, was that there is expected changes in primary production to happen across the UK. And quite interesting, we've found that the southern regions are likely to become more productive and the northern regions to become less productive over time. And obviously this has clear implications for fisheries. So in the backing papers there's a lot of explanation behind where this has come from. And as I said earlier, our other key focus was to say that we've been trying to identify why some of the topics experience changes as a result of climate change and others are yet to be reported and possibly even seen. So as I said, we're trying to explain that in the report card also. So for each of the themes, with new headlines for acidification and Arctic sea ice and sea temperature, we saw that there were some changes in sea level and stratification, but not as reportable as acidification. A lot of the time for acidification, of course, there's lots of funding going into these areas. Sea temperature, for obvious reasons, is constantly measured, and so changes in these are picked up on a much more regular basis. We have several new headlines for, we call it HBDSEG, but health and biological diverse seas. So for fish, non-natives, water birds and intertidal habitats, we saw several headlines, and there are several regional level stories to report for marine mammals and fish. Looking at clean and safe seas, we had new headlines for coastal flooding and human health, which of course are of particular interest to policymakers and in light of what's been occurring with flooding across the UK recently. And for productive seas, we despite recently doing a special topic on fisheries and aquaculture, we still had a lot of headlines on the fisheries topic. One thing that was quite interesting to see was that there was little to report in the behaviour of industries, so offshore structures and shipping and ports, in response to climate change, and a lot of them were saying that they're actually keeping a watching brief. So working with them on an industrial level to look at how they are adapting to climate change is something that we're looking to do more of. What was particularly nice was the confidence ratings have pretty much stayed the same. In actual fact, 9 improved and 5 went down somewhat. So it's particularly nice that although we're gaining more and more evidence, the confidence is actually also increasing. Because a lot of the time, as I'm sure lots of you will know, as you gain more evidence, sometimes your confidence can actually be depleted with almost knowing too much. Okay. So the next part is just to pull out a couple of the regional impacts. All of the authors are asked to highlight key messages for various regions. Again, a lot of these were pulled out from the healthy and biologically diverse seas. And these stories quite often recognise the shift in the timing and spatial patterns and distributions of a number of marine species, namely the little egrets, white-sided and striped dolphins. And for those of you that are interested in fisheries and recreational activities, triggerfish availability has improved, and sole are shifting their spawning season. So to look at predictions for the future on a regional level, the regional impacts for the future, again, they have a bit of a wider scope than on what we understand now. Still, it does mention that there are expected changes in the fish species distribution, and importantly, a more expected spread in non-natives. I recently found out today that there's a new crab species, an Asian crab species, that's been identified that's new to UK waters. But we're also highlighting that there's an estimated increase in flood risk. And of course, recent news highlights that this is actually what's occurring. And as I mentioned earlier, perhaps a positive note for socioeconomics is that there is expected increase in polar transit routes. Now, in 2009, there were 2 commercial ships that used the Northern Sea route. 2 years later, this increased to 34, and quite surprisingly, perhaps, in 2050, they're expecting this route to account for 5% of global traffic. And so this has direct implications on the biodiversity and ecosystem in our waters. So as part of the process of writing the backing papers, we promote the authors in pulling out knowledge gaps in their area. And what we decided to do this time was to look at these knowledge gaps, and actually not only was it what we decided to do, the Marine Science Coordination Committee were promoting and assisting us in doing this. And we took our knowledge gaps and combined them with knowledge gaps from the CCRA, the Climate Change Risk Assessment, and Charting Progress 2. And we combined these to 75 gaps and went to the UCMAS evidence groups, inviting them to prioritise these topics against each other, so these knowledge gaps. And they were ranked according to policy drivers, science drivers, and growth and sustainability. All of the way that we did this, so our methodology, is provided on the website, and the full list of knowledge gaps that were provided. But ultimately, we drew these down to 19. We stripped this down to 19 gaps, and these were divided into, presented and divided into evidence groups again, as the scorings across the evidence groups weren't directly comparable. So where are we with this now? We presented it to the Marine Science Coordination Committee in April, and we're still awaiting a formal response. But what it has done is it's highlighted which areas, from a scientist's point of view, possibly they should consider putting funding towards in the future. And we're hoping that they'll pick this up and funding bodies will use this to assist in their decision making. And also for scientists to pick them up and run with them and actually look into these areas further. So for ocean processes, we found that there's a gap in the physical understanding of the Arctic system and Arctic sea ice, and this should be filled. We're also looking to provide a greater link between climate change and the Atlantic heat conveyor. We're expecting there to be more research in looking at how acidification affects marine life, and also how pH affects the systems at a local and regional scale. For healthy and biologically diverse seas, we're really keen to look at the distribution, structure and variability of deep sea biological communities. We'd like to integrate more observation and modelling work together to create more robust predictions on fish and their movements. Also, this is already being stimulated as we speak, but to look more at jellyfish blooms over time, particularly in the UK waters. And then to look at links between warming, plankton and fisheries. For clean and safe seas, we're keen to look at how coastal defences and natural flood and management measures can be integrated with assessments for future coastal development. There's aspirations to link clinical cases and environmental monitoring together for human health, and to also look at how extreme weather events are likely to impact upon human health. Looking at PSEG, the productive seas, there's aspiration to look at the rate of sea level rise and how it's likely to impact on coastal structures, and also on other coastal flood system variables for planning reasons. And there's hope to look at the dependency of economies on fishing fleets and the vulnerability of fisheries to ocean acidification. So our work is constantly evolving, and as I said before, we complete the report cards, and now we're approaching the next phase, which is to look at a special topic. And then the year after, if we get funded, we'll be doing another annual report and so on. So this year, this was kind of by decision of the steering group, and we've decided to focus on marine biodiversity policy and legislation. So currently we're working on marine protected areas and achieving the implications of climate change on marine protected areas and achieving good environmental status under the biodiversity indicators of MSFD, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. So where we are at the moment is that we're developing 3 journal papers, one on marine protected area networks with lowercase p's, because we do look at the Scottish marine protected areas, and we're looking across all of the UK. So we're looking at networks, sites, and also the biodiversity indicators for achieving GES under MSFD. So we've got lead authors working on those as we speak, and the MCCIP Secretariat and its steering group are also writing an introductory paper. So the plan is to be submitting those to a journal anytime soon, and whilst this is submitted to the journal, at that stage we then start developing a 12-page report card, and we're planning to launch this in early 2015. Again, I should say that if you have any ideas for special topics in the future, we're always gathering these and providing these to the steering group. Another part of the work that we're doing we call climate smart working, and it's actually very similar to the Environment Agency's climate ready work. So we're really keen. A lot of the time we're focusing on impact, so marine climate change impacts. What we're trying to do more of is to look at how industry is responding to those impacts and how they can adapt. So a few years ago we put feeders out to a few industrial partners, and BMF, the British Marine Federation, were most forthcoming. So we decided to do the report card on climate change and the UK marine leisure industry. We performed this work with Julian Andrews at the Environment Agency and across the MCCIP partnership. So the way that we performed this work was that we invited the British Marine Federation members along to a workshop and looked at how climate change is evolving, what we know and its current and future impacts, and how that's likely to affect the marine leisure industry and how they can plan for and adapt to these conditions. And as a result of this, so all of this information was combined, and as a result of this we provided them with a single report card with a very similar branding style to the annual report cards that we create. But really to assist them and the community in looking at their own boatyards or marinas and taking account for what's happening, what's likely to happen to them in the future, but very much on a single business level. So the concerns that came out from them are summarised by the following points. So the warmer, drier summers are expected, which of course will increase participation, but then there's always the negative of non-native fouling the structures, expected droughts. With changes in sediment supply, there would be a requirement for more dredging and costs. With sea level rise, there's a vulnerability on the site and access due to the flooding. And with storms and heavy rain, there's expected closures from high tides, wave height will increase, affecting safety, etc. Quite interestingly, the parts that they felt were most important to them were the increased participation and the added pressure to the infrastructure, the risk of overtopping quays with sea level rise, but quite interestingly, they were very aware of the fact that more legislation should be put in place to reduce carbon emissions within the industry. So following this exercise, as I said, the report card was produced, and at the back of this report card, all of this is available online, but at the back of this report card we provided them with a workspace. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but what we've used is something called the BACLIAT, which is the Business Areas Climate Impact Assessment tool, and we've used this as a tool to help them brainstorm what impacts are relevant to their industry and how they can look at threats and opportunities and adaptation for them as an individual business. Now, what's particularly nice about this process is that BMF, because they've been involved from the beginning, they've got a product that is particularly useful for them. This can then be distributed more widely, so not just to British Marine Federation members, but it was written with the whole marine leisure industry in mind. But with this BACLIAT that I've discussed, this workspace, BMF are actually collecting, so although it's available in the hard copy, online it's an interactive workspace, so the page can be saved and sent to BMF. So currently they're actually creating a database of all of the threats and opportunities of individual businesses, what adaptation actions are taking place. So it's a really nice way to track how behaviour is evolving and for the business owners to look at what other people are doing in response, what their experiences are, and to really formalise some case studies in the area. Wow, I got around that quite quickly. So on to questions. One thing that I would like to say is that what we are particularly keen, as I've said, we're entering this phase 3 in MCCIP where we're writing a business plan. So we're particularly keen to hear about have any suggestions for MCCIP and work that we should be doing, and if there's any information that it would be particularly apt to gather for you and provide you with further information to help you in your work. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll open up to questions, please.
Well, thank you, Georgia. If anyone does have a question, if you could raise your virtual hand, we can then unmute you. Alternatively, you can type it into the questions section. Does anyone have any questions? I think we have one from Claire Scanlon. Hang on a second. I'll just unmute Claire. Hello, Claire?
Yep.
Hello, Claire? No, I don't think we have Claire. Does anybody else?
I've seen the message from Alejandro. I apologise.
Well, no, I think the problem might have been on Alejandro's end actually, because your slides were working fine. So.
Okay.
But.
Of course, I mean, if you want to kind of have a look at the website and absorb some of the information, then please do so. And we're always available, and we check the emails every day, and well, more often than every day. But if you do want to email me at office@mcip.org.uk, myself or Paul Buckley will get back to you. And we're really happy to look at how we can work with people more. We've got a management group meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. So if people are interested in collaborations or work that we can do, then it would be a great time for us to bring this up at the meeting. So, yeah, ideas always welcome.
Yeah, I think that might be the best approach. If any of you do think of any questions, if you could, just use the email address there and drop Georgia a line. Other than that, I don't think there's anything left to say except thank you. Very interesting talk. Thank you, Georgia.
Thank you. I've just seen one question.
Oh yes, here we go from Beth Scott. Yeah.
So it mentions the need for cumulative effects research. So one of the things that we're looking at in particular, at CEFAS we're doing a lot of cumulative effects research, and we have a lady in our team that's working on that. So it's certainly something that we consider in the work that we do. We're hoping that a lot of that will be covered in the marine protected areas and the MSFD work that we're doing for the special topic report card. But I mean, of course, it would actually be possibly a possible topic for the special topic report card next time round. But yeah, I do think a lot of that will be covered in the marine protected area work. Absolutely.
I don't think there are any other questions. I mean, I've got one just out of personal interest. I mean, have you heard of any impacts on the shellfish industry in the south of England in terms of ocean acidification and climate change in that regard?
Have I heard of any impacts? I'm sure there are any, but whether there are actually any impacts happening as actually affecting the economy, I'm not sure. But it's quite interesting that you said that, and I completely forgot. But the next Climate Smart Working report card that we're doing is with CEFAS. So as I came to come and do this webinar, Paul, my colleague, was on the phone with a chap from CEFAS, and so the next report card that we're working on and hoping to publish this year is particularly on the fisheries. I think possibly more wild fisheries stocks, because that's what they need to produce their report on at the moment. But it's something that we definitely want to cover shortly.
Excellent. I'll just have a quick final check to see if there are any further questions. Anybody does have any other questions? Oh, Claire Galletti. Oh, no. Not sure whether Claire raised her hand. Claire?
Sorry, it was a mistake. I didn't mean to click there.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Right, well, I think we'll leave it there, Georgia. Again, many thanks, and if any of you do think of any questions, if you could just send an email to Georgia at that address. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye. Bye, Georgia.
Thank you. Bye-bye.